Most people imagine hell as fire, screams, and chaos without order. Saint Bridget of Sweden wrote that this image, although frightening, was incomplete and dangerously misleading. When she was allowed to glimpse what awaited certain souls after death, she insisted that the terror did not begin with physical pain, but with understanding, a sudden and irreversible awareness that something infinite had been lost forever, and that no force, no prayer, and no passage of time could ever restore it. Saint Bridget did not seek visions, nor did she desire extraordinary experiences. She lived much of her life immersed in ordinary responsibilities, as a wife and the mother of 8 children, familiar with exhaustion, grief, and the weight of daily duties. Living in the 14th century, surrounded by war, plague, political corruption, and moral decay, she already knew the fragility of human life long before her revelations began. When the visions came, she resisted them. She feared deception, feared pride, and feared misunderstanding. She wrote only because she believed she was commanded to do so, and she did so with restraint, repeatedly stating that human language could never fully express what she had been shown. She described hell not as a realm of disorder, but as a place of terrible clarity, governed by a strict and unchanging order. Nothing there is random. Nothing is excessive. Every soul, she wrote, is placed according to the truth it rejected during life. There is no confusion in hell, no debate, no sense of injustice. Only the full unveiling of what was chosen freely, persistently, and knowingly. In one vision, Saint Bridget was shown a vast region of darkness, not empty, but densely populated. What disturbed her most was not noise, but silence. The souls there were fully conscious, fully aware, and incapable of distraction. Many did not scream. She wrote that memory in hell is perfect and unrelenting. Every moment in which grace was offered and refused becomes eternally present, not as a fleeting regret, but as a knowledge that never weakens. She saw souls who, during their earthly lives, had been considered respectable and even virtuous. Souls admired by others, trusted, consulted, and praised. Souls who spoke of God, fulfilled religious obligations, and believed themselves safe because they were not openly corrupt. These souls had delayed repentance, assuming that mercy would always remain available. They believed there would always be more time. In hell, Saint Bridget wrote, time no longer exists. There is no later, no postponement, no opportunity to revise what has already been sealed. What struck her most forcefully was the complete absence of hope. She described hope not as an emotion, but as something almost tangible, like air or light. In hell, hope simply does not exist. Souls do not hope for relief. They do not hope for mercy. They do not hope for annihilation. They understand with absolute certainty that their condition is final. This certainty, she wrote, becomes one of the most severe torments, because it removes even the smallest illusion of escape. Saint Bridget also described how souls are confronted at the moment of death, not with spectacle and not with violence, but with truth. She saw demons approach quietly, not to drag the soul by force, but to accuse it using its own life as evidence. Every ignored warning, every neglected grace, every deliberate compromise is presented without distortion. The soul recognizes the truth of every accusation and cannot deny it. Self-deception, which protected it during life, collapses entirely in that moment. According to her revelations, this confrontation is so overwhelming that many souls fall into despair before they even enter their place of punishment. The soul sees clearly who God is, who it was created to be, and what it chose instead. That clarity, Saint Bridget wrote, burns more fiercely than any fire, because it cannot be escaped, numbed, or forgotten. Fire may pain the senses, but truth pierces the essence of the soul itself. She was shown that hell is not primarily a punishment imposed from the outside, but the final state of a soul locked forever inside the truth it refused while alive. Love rejected becomes absence. Freedom misused becomes imprisonment. Mercy ignored becomes judgment. None of this is experienced as unfair. Souls know exactly why they are there, and that knowledge never leaves them. Saint Bridget wept as she recorded these revelations. She warned that many would read her words and reduce them to symbols or metaphors, comforting themselves with the belief that reality could not be so severe. She insisted that what she saw was not symbolic. It was precise, structured, and irrevocable. She wrote that God allowed her to see these things not to satisfy curiosity or inspire fear alone, but to awaken souls who still possessed the ability to choose. Hell, as she described it, is not terrifying because it is cruel, but because it is logical. Every consequence follows directly from decisions made freely, repeatedly, and often casually during earthly life. The greatest tragedy she perceived was not that souls were punished, but that many had been warned countless times and still chose delay. They had lived as though death were distant, repentance optional, and judgment abstract. In hell, abstraction vanishes. Only truth remains, and it remains forever. Saint Bridget concluded that hell is worse than imagined, not because it exceeds human fear, but because it fulfills it. Everything the soul avoided confronting in life confronts it at once, without relief and without end. And the soul knows, with devastating clarity, that it chose this path, step by step, while mercy was still within reach. This is why her testimony endures, not because it describes flames or demons, but because it reveals the final consequence of a life lived in postponement. Hell, as Saint Bridget described it, is the eternal realization that grace was offered, and refused, until nothing remained to be offered at all. After showing Saint Bridget the state of souls in hell, the revelations moved deeper, into what she described as the ordered punishments that correspond to the sins freely chosen during life. She emphasized repeatedly that these punishments were not arbitrary nor exaggerated, but directly connected to how each soul had used its freedom. Hell, she wrote, is not chaos, but consequence. In one of the most detailed visions, Saint Bridget was shown that hell is divided into regions, each reflecting a dominant rejection of God. Souls were not mixed randomly. Those who had despised humility were placed among souls consumed by relentless self-contempt. Those who had abused authority were surrounded by an unending awareness of the harm they had caused, without the power to justify or excuse themselves. Those who had lived for pleasure found themselves deprived of every comfort, yet eternally conscious of what they had pursued. She described punishments that did not always involve physical pain as humans imagine it, but interior suffering far more intense. Every false image they had constructed of themselves collapsed completely. They saw who they truly were, and that vision never faded. Saint Bridget wrote that many souls in hell suffer through their senses, but even more suffer through memory and intellect. Souls that had enjoyed corrupt speech were tormented by sounds that mocked them endlessly. Souls that had delighted in sinful sights were forced to behold scenes that reflected the ugliness of their own choices. Yet she insisted that no single punishment compared to the torment of understanding that God's love had been present throughout their lives, and deliberately ignored. One of the most disturbing aspects of her revelations was the punishment of souls who had received much grace. She wrote that souls who had known truth, heard warnings, and still delayed repentance suffered more intensely. Not because God was harsher with them, but because they understood more clearly what they had rejected. Their knowledge became a source of agony. The more light they had received, the more unbearable their darkness became. Saint Bridget also described the presence of demons not as rulers, but as instruments of accusation. Demons, she wrote, do not invent torments. They expose. They remind souls continuously of the moments when conversion was possible and refused. These accusations never cease, and the soul cannot contradict them. What makes this torment unbearable is that the soul recognizes the justice of every accusation. In another vision, she was shown souls who had lived double lives, outwardly pious, inwardly corrupt. These souls, she wrote, suffer a unique punishment. They are eternally exposed. All masks are removed. All hidden intentions are revealed. Their inner reality is laid bare forever, and they are forced to remain in the truth they avoided while alive. She emphasized that hell is not a place where souls grow accustomed to suffering. There is no dulling of pain, no adaptation. Every punishment remains sharp and present. Time does not soften memory. Eternity does not lessen awareness. The soul remains fully itself, fully conscious, fully aware, without rest or interruption. Saint Bridget was also shown that souls in hell are incapable of love. They remember having been capable of it, but cannot experience it anymore. They understand what love is, but remain permanently separated from it. This absence, she wrote, is a wound that never heals. Souls see God as He is, infinitely good, infinitely just, infinitely loving, and know that they are forever excluded from Him. This exclusion is not imposed as revenge, but accepted as the final result of their choices. She described that even the smallest consolation is absent. There is no companionship that brings relief. Souls are aware of others, but there is no unity, no solidarity, no shared comfort. Each soul is isolated within its own guilt and awareness. This isolation, Saint Bridget wrote, is one of the most severe punishments, because it reflects the selfishness cultivated during life. In one of her most sobering visions, she was shown souls who had mocked sin, treating it lightly, joking about it, dismissing warnings as exaggeration. These souls, she wrote, now understand the weight of every action, every word, every intention. What they once considered insignificant now confronts them with overwhelming force. There is no such thing as a small sin in hell, because every sin represents a rejection of infinite love. Saint Bridget recorded that God allowed her to see these punishments, not to inspire despair, but urgency. She wrote that hell exists because human freedom is real, and that freedom is respected even when it leads to eternal loss. God does not coerce love. Souls who refused Him in life are not forced to embrace Him in eternity. Her visions contradicted this illusion. She saw ordinary people, familiar people. What condemned them was not a single act, but a pattern of refusal, delay, and indifference. The most frightening truth she communicated was that no soul in hell believes itself innocent. There is no protest, no claim of misunderstanding. Souls know precisely why they are there. This knowledge is permanent and inescapable. Hell, she wrote, is the eternal agreement of the soul with the judgment it once denied. As she finished recording these revelations, Saint Bridget expressed profound sorrow for those still living. She wrote that many would dismiss her testimony as extreme, outdated, or symbolic. She warned that such dismissal itself reflects the same attitude that leads souls to destruction, postponement, indifference, and confidence without conversion. She insisted that God allowed her to describe hell, not to paralyze souls with fear, but to awaken them while choice remains possible, while breath remains, while time still exists. She emphasized that mercy is abundant in life, but non-existent after death. What is refused repeatedly becomes unavailable forever. Saint Bridget concluded that hell is worse than imagined, not because it is more violent, but because it is perfectly just. Nothing there is excessive. Nothing is accidental. Everything follows from what was chosen freely when grace was offered patiently. Her testimony ends not with threats, but with a warning written in grief. That ability, she wrote, is more precious than any vision, because once it is gone, no vision, no suffering, and no regret can restore it.